Well, welcome to class. Great to have you with us in a different way once again as we do our video here for November, as we kind of think a little bit more about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, because that's really the whole theme for the year, is learning what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. That's what you have been called to be. That's what God has created you to be a follower of Jesus, a disciple of Jesus, even in difficult times. And certainly these are difficult times. You know, we started the school year, this particular year of confirmation, learning about our spiritual gifts, thinking about the kinds of gifts that we have, the abilities that God has given to us. And then last month we talked about how we relate to younger kids, how we relate to kids who look up to us. And believe me, they do. They look up to you. And you have the opportunity to really be a difference maker in their lives. That's kind of an exciting thing, I think. This month, we're going to think about seniors. And no, I don't mean high school seniors. I mean seniors. We'll get to that in a moment. And we're going to talk about what it means to appreciate God's gifts across many generations. So we're going to talk about generations, about seniors, and what it means to be faithful disciples of Jesus. Before I get to that, please don't forget to do your worship notes. You can watch the videos online, and then you can fill in the form. It's right on the website on the confirmation page. Just fill in the fields, hit the send, and it goes right to me. I get them and I save them. So thanks for doing those. Those of you who've done them. Those of you who are getting a little behind, time to start catching up. And get those taken care of. Let me tell you something else. What I also appreciate is the thoughtfulness that a lot of you have put into those worship notes. I've really been impressed with that this year. That there's some comments in there that I've just really thought, wow, they're really thinking about this. So thanks for doing that, and thanks for putting a little time and effort into it as you learn more and more about being a faithful disciple of Jesus. What I want to do is, before we get started, I want to take just a moment to maybe look ahead a little bit and see where we're heading. Remember a couple things. Class meets again on Zoom on November 4th. We'll be meeting on November 4th on the Zoom session. We'll talk a little bit about this video then. And then outdoor gathering on November 18th, if the weather helps. We've kind of decided that if the temperature is 40 or above at 6 o'clock, we'll go for it. No, it will not look like this because it will be a lot colder. But if you have been at the outdoor gathering, you know it's been pretty good. Wendy Kane does a great job with providing us a whole bunch of goodies, some hot dogs and s'mores and some beverages. If you haven't been there, give it a shot, but only if the temperature is 40 or above. At 6 o'clock, we meet across the street from the church. We've got the fire pit going. And you know, if it's gotten cold enough that it just isn't going to happen anymore, we'll start it up again maybe in April or May when we get towards the end of the school year. Maybe even March. I don't know if it'll be warm enough in March, but you never know. Then in December, the video, I'm going to post, the December video will be posted by November 25th, the Wednesday before. We'll meet on Zoom December 2nd, as we always do. And we're going to be thinking about families. We're going to think about families. We've thought about kids. We've thought about seniors. Now we're going to think about a little bit about our families. And the outdoor gathering would be in December sometime. I don't know. I think it's going to be kind of cold then, but you never know. Could have some warm days even in December, so we'll kind of watch that, but kind of keep an eye out for that. Then, when we get into January, we're going to think a little bit about stewardship, our stewardship of money, how we use our money. I'm not sure how that's going to work yet. I've got to think that through because I can't do it the way I've done it in the past. The way I did it in the past, your moms and dads came with you and we kind of did a lot of stuff working together. I got to start thinking about that a little bit. But we'll be doing something in the area of stewardship in January. And like I said, I'm not sure how it's going to work. I'm not sure what the schedule's going to be. I'm still thinking that one through. So when I get it figured out, hopefully in the next couple weeks, I'll let you know when I'm able to do that. Okay, so that's a little bit of where we're heading. Let's just take a breath, breathe in, breathe out, and let's move on. But also, I want to throw a riddle at you. I want to throw a riddle at you with a little bit of a story behind it. In Greek mythology, in the myth cycle of the ancient Greeks, there was a story about a guy named Oedipus. And Oedipus traveled a lot. And he came upon a town called Thebes. And outside the town of Thebes was a sphinx. This is kind of what a sphinx would have looked like. A lot of sphinxes in Egypt too, but this was in Greece. And this particular sphinx was not a very nice creature. Kind of a little bit of an attitude issue. Basically what he did was he posed a riddle to people who wanted to enter or leave the town of Thebes. If you got the riddle right, you got to go in or leave. If you didn't, you were his dinner. He ate you. Seriously. But no one had been able to solve the riddle. So here's the riddle that Oedipus was confronted with when he approached the town of Thebes. A question. What creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening? Think about that for a moment. What creature can you think of that in the morning would walk on 4 legs, in the afternoon would walk on 2 legs, and in the evening would walk on 3? Got any ideas? Well, here's the answer. And Oedipus, by the way, Oedipus got it right. He was not going to be lunch for the Sphinx. The answer? Human beings. You think? Human beings. You don't think? You think? You don't think? Well, consider this. Now, think big. Got to think outside the box here. Think a little bit differently. Human beings walk on 4 legs in the morning. That is, when they are young. They walk on 2 legs in the afternoon when they're, well, your age, my age. Maybe not that young and cool anymore, but you know. And when they are in the evening, when they are seniors, they use canes, right? Or at least that's the way we picture it. That's kind of the stereotype, isn't it? The stereotype is old people use canes. Of course, it's not always old people who use canes. I found this picture of a couple kids using canes. And then my favorite picture is this one, this little guy using, you can see here he's got a cane too. So I suppose other people use canes too. But the answer to the riddle, you see, is that it's human beings. Human beings who walk on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs in the afternoon, and 3 legs in the evening. So when we think about this, when we think about people and ourselves, and we think about seniors, we're going to get to those in a moment, but we could think this a little bit bigger and say, what about all of the generations? The generations that start with infants, with young infants, with babies, or infants, toddlers, little kids, those little elementary kids, those kindergartners, and so on. But then growing up to be kind of, like us, or like you anyway, and then finally getting to be old, which is closer to what I'm getting to be, and maybe slowing down a little bit and using a cane. Okay? Maybe not like this guy, but you know what I mean. What we're talking about is we're talking about generations. And we're talking about how, as human beings, we grow through generations. And so we start with the little kid here in the diapers and move on, and we become, maybe this is the middle school, the high school, college age, and then we become young adults, and then we become middle-aged adults, and we have families, perhaps, and then we get to be grandma. Or down here, the kid with the little lock of hair there, the boy in the diapers again, getting to be the young, energetic, let's say, 3rd grader. You ever watch first, second, 3rd graders? They're just like constantly in motion. They just have energy to burn. That's just the way they seem. And then get a little bit older, a little bit more mature. Get to be. He's even got it might be it looks like it's I'm sure it's not. Maybe it is. Looks like an Apple laptop there. Get to be young adults, right? He's got flowers. must have a girlfriend, I don't know, the flowers. Moving on, you've got a little cup of Starbucks or something there, and then eventually, becoming a senior. And so the generations, the cycle of generations of moving from young into that middle part of life to the older part of life. It's part of the cycle of life. In fact, I would argue that's what life is. Life is getting older. If you're not getting older, you're not alive. I mean, isn't that what it means to be alive? To be alive means you continue to add days to your lifespan or years. If I'm not getting older, I'm not alive. So this whole idea, getting older, which maybe for you is kind of exciting because you're thinking, yeah, I want to get older. Can't wait till I get to be a senior in high school and get out of high school and do all. There will come believe me, there'll come a point where you'll wish you weren't getting any older. You'll just, in fact, I got to tell you a story here, real quick story. So when I was, how old was I? Probably about 26, 27, before I met my wife. So I went out on a date, kind of cute girl, and we went to this Italian restaurant, and of course we were adults, so we ordered Italian food, and she ordered a glass of wine, and the waitress carded her. Right? Because she had to make sure she was old enough to have the alcohol. And as the waitress walked away, my date leaned over to me and said, "She gets a big tip." Because my date, who was probably 27, was so excited that someone thought she might only be 18. Ooh, she was just excited that day will come for you. That day will come when you will say, "I wish I was a few years younger." But the reality is, this is what life is. Life is growing older. That is a part of the rhythm of life. And so as we think about life across generations, we could start by asking, just what is a senior citizen? So about 4 years ago, here's the mistake I made. I made this mistake. We were with the 8th graders, like you guys were last year. It was the last class of 8th grade, the last class in May. And I was kind of telling the 8th graders what was coming up. That in 9th grade, one of the things we do is we learn about seniors, and we have some fun with them. And I won't tell you the rest of the story because I'll save that for later. But one of the kids raised his hand. He said, "Is that senior citizens?" And I realized he thought I was saying we're going to have to learn to have fun with high school seniors. No, we're not talking high school seniors. We're talking senior citizens. So what is a senior citizen? And when we say a senior citizen, what do we mean by that? Well, we mean somebody who's old, right? Isn't a senior citizen an old person? Right? Yeah. So talking about seniors, not high school seniors is talking about old people, right? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, maybe. But maybe it's also talking about generations, about thinking about how we are part of generations, from younger to older to older to older to more mature. Okay? Or you take a family, here's a family with a great-granddaughter, the granddaughter, the daughter, and mom. Or doing it the other way around, a child, her mother, her grandmother, her great-grandmother. And some of you may have grandmas and grandpas you relate to. Some of you might have great-grandmas and grandpas. Just the way my family was, my parents were a little younger, they were the younger ones in their families. So I knew 2 of my grandparents. I never knew my dad's parents. Those grandparents were had already died before I was born, and not even close to my great-grandparents. But my mother has a picture of her with her mother and her grandmother and her great-grandmother. So sometimes there are those generational pictures or moments where you can bring 4 generations together. Or even, how about 2, 4, 6 generations at one time? Now this is from 2012. And in 2012, there was a young child named Braylon Higgins. And Braylon Higgins was 7 weeks old. Her mother was kind of young. Please don't go this route. Savannah, her mother, was 16. Savannah's mother, Marlo, was 39. Marlo's mother, Betty, was 70. Betty's mother, Louise, was 88. And Louise's mother, Molly, was 111 years old. 6 generations from Molly at 111 to little Braylon at 7 weeks. And actually, here's a picture of that family. Now this is from 2012, okay? Here's Molly, and let's see, this was Braylon. There's Braylon right there, and the rest of the family in between. Doesn't happen often, but sometimes it happens, and sometimes we get these incredible moments when generations can be together across a vast distance. But for most of us, you know, it's not getting together with our great-great-grandparents. We don't have that luxury. We're lucky to have our grandparents. And I hope you have that opportunity. And if you do have that opportunity, please relish it. Relish the opportunity to connect with your grandparents, because that won't be there forever. And there'll be a time when you'll miss that. So if you've still got grandparents, you know, and I know during COVID we can't always visit as easily as we once did. Call them up. Call them. You'll make their day. My grandmother, my mother's mother, so the grandmother I knew, her last few years were in Wausau. She was living in Wausau in an assisted living, and for one of those years, I was up in Wakefield, Michigan. So if you go on a map and you look up Wausau, you go up US 51, you go up through Merrill, and then up to Tomahawk and Minocqua, and you get up to Ironwood in Michigan, Hurley and Ironwood, and then you go east about 15 miles, you come to a little town called Wakefield. I was there for my student internship. I was a student pastor there. It was September of '84 through August of '85. My grandmother died in February of 1986, so it was, you know, her last year or two of life. But I was only about 55 miles, about a little over an hour away from Grandma, maybe an hour and a half, depending upon the roads. And about 5 or 6 times that year, I took my day off and I shot down to visit Grandma. And my mother told me, she said, Grandma was just so excited, because sometimes I'd do a little shopping for her. Sometimes I'd go out to KFC. I'd go out to KFC and get some KFC and bring it in. But a couple times, she reserved lunch for me in the lunchroom. She could do that for her guests. And she was just so proud to show off her grandson to her friends. Call your grandparents. If they're not local, come on, if they're not local, you can make a phone call. Call them up. Say, hey, how you doing, Grandma? And you know what? Tell them what you're doing. Grandparents love to hear what their grandkids are doing. And they like to know that they are being remembered. So if you haven't done that, do it. If you're doing it already, great. But if you haven't done it, do that. So we have generations. And so we go back to our picture of our generations here, you know, and you've got child and mom, grandma, great-grandma, great-great-grandma, and great-great-great-grandma. But what about you? So when we talk about generations, one of the things that we do is a lot of times we label generations. That's not always a good thing, but we kind of label a generation. And typically, we label those generations kind of after the fact. It's kind of hard to tell during a generation what's really going on. It's easier when you get a few years past to look back at the generation and understand what it is. But most people would say that at least the last stuff I heard, it changes, is you would be in Generation Z. And Generation Z has all sorts of characteristics. I mean, this is a generation that's into digital, that's connected, computer, savvy, mobility. I know during COVID, some of this is a little questionable, but underemployed. A lot of Generation Z people don't really have a job that really, and I'm not talking about money so much as just, they're not doing what they really would like to do. They've been trained to do stuff and then they can't quite find a job for what they want to do. So that's a part of Generation Z that's maybe not as good for them, but also a little restless. Inspiration is important for Generation Z, and friends. And games. There's a lot of things that make up kind of the DNA of being Generation Z. Sometimes what we do is we can put this on a bit of a grid here, and what we look at is the different generations and the years. And the years are when that generation was born. Okay? So, for example, I'm a baby boomer. 1946 to 1963. I was born in 1960, so I'm the tail end of the baby boom generation, right at the tail end of it. My brother, I have a brother, younger brother, he's Generation X, okay, because he was born in 1969. So what makes up the baby boomer generation? Things like Vietnam. Remember last month when we talked about the monsters? Remember I talked about that? And I talked about the Vietnam War ending? I watched that stuff happen. I remember that. And I remember the trauma that it was for us as a country to see that happen in Vietnam. So that's an important part. Woodstock's a little before my time. The civil rights movement, I was a little young to see that. Kennedy's assassination, I was like 3. But Watergate, I watched Watergate happen. I watched the Watergate impeachment hearings. I watched Richard Nixon resign on television. The only president to ever do that. That's part of my generation. And then space exploration. I remember watching Neil Armstrong on the moon. And it was like so awesome because I'll tell you how awesome it was. I read a story recently that Richard Nixon, who was the president at that time, he had 2 speeches to share. He was going to give a national address, national television, after they walked on the moon. He had 2 speeches or addresses ready to give. The first address was the one he gave, complimenting, congratulating, lifting up this incredible achievement. The second was saying, we sent these men to the moon, from which they will never return, because we weren't even sure we could bring them back home again. And what if we hadn't brought them home again? I mean, those are things that were a part of who we were, that uncertainty. And I remember watching that. That was part of my generation. Now, Generation X, my brother's generation, things like the Challenger disaster, which is also very traumatic, when the Challenger space shuttle blew up, and people, were just stunned by that. I mean, there are all sorts of different things. Columbine, 9/11. 9/11, I know it happened during your lifetime. No, maybe, yes, no, yes. I'm trying to remember. You guys around in 9/11? Probably not. No, you wouldn't have been around 9/11. Almost. But not, Generation Y millennials, yeah, they experienced it. They saw it. They saw it happen. You guys read about it. They saw it. For your generation, the rise of populism, that's Donald Trump, like it or not, that's the rise of populism. The first black president, Obama, like it or not, that's part of your growing up experience that molds you. Marriage equality. Studies now say 70% of Americans believe that same-gender marriages are okay. Marriage equality is a big part. ISIS, right? Those are all things that are a part of who you are as a Generation Zer. Now, I've experienced it too, but you experienced it in your growing years. It's kind of burned into your brain as stuff that is for you what Vietnam and Watergate and space exploration is for me. So different generations experience different things. This is another way to do it. This is a way of thinking about not so much what they experience, but how they respond. So we have traditionalists. Okay, these would be the people born right before, during the Great Depression and World War II. They value authority and a top-down management. They're hardworking, okay? My experience, we expect some degree of deference to our opinions, but we also tend to be workaholics. Tell me about it. Generation X, they'll work hard as they need to, but they understand an importance of work and life balance. Generation Z, you guys, we're still not sure exactly what Generation Z is going to look like. It's still happening. It's still developing. But you're digital natives. You grew up with computers and digital electronics. My first computer, how old was I? I was 27 or 28, the first computer. I remember getting a calculator when I was about 12 years old that would add, subtract, multiply, and divide, and it was like I think it cost $50. And it was so cool. I mean, wow, you could do this. You've grown up with that. You assume, you expect that. So you're different. And that's not good or bad. just different. So different generations experience different things. Another example of this. This is Generation X, Y, and Z. Generation X, those born from now this is a little bit different. 65 to 80, they want a work-life balance. They like to text message. Okay. The Generation Y, 1981 to 95, they're online and they're mobile. Generation Z, FaceTime, multitaskers, nano computing, just a whole different, different ways that different generations experience how life goes. And then one final example, this is multiple generations at work, how they work at work. Traditionalists who experienced the Great Depression and World War I, work is an obligation. And they're going to stay in that job for life. Their career is slow and steady. My generation, the boomers, we experienced things like television and the moon landing and Watergate. We expect work. Work is expected. I really just want job security. It's kind of my generation's aspiration. Upward mobility, kind of keep moving up the path. I'll move down to generation, they call it Generation 2020. Okay, Generation Z, Generation 2020. You're the group that's experienced the economic downturn. You've experienced global warming since day one. That's new to us, older folk. That's something we just knew about, learned about. Job changes happen constantly. I had a couple of years ago, the president of a community college said they tell their incoming students, expect to be retrained 7 times in your working years. You don't just go to school, go to college, learn something, and be done. Expect to be retrained. And you guys are career multitaskers. You multitask in the midst of your career because you've got to learn to do different things. So it's just kind of a way of understanding how different generations experience work. So I just wanted to throw these in. I thought this was kind of cute, kind of fun. I like this. A couple cartoons that I found. So here's the Consumer Electronics Show, and these 2 kids over here, and if you look at the Consumer Electronics, there's lots of screens and so on, all that digital stuff. And he's holding a book, the book called Ivanhoe. And the one kid says, "It's a gift from my grandpa." And the other kid says, "Cool, how do you turn it on?" As if they have no clue about how to use a book. By the way, if you watch Star Trek, the original series, which came out in the 1960s, late 1960s, there is an episode where one of the it's a visiting character, he's an attorney, he's all into books, and the other characters can't quite understand that. I mean, what's with a book? But it's ancient stuff, but will we be there someday? We can get Kindle and those kinds of things. Maybe you don't need a book anymore, and yet there still are books. But that is a difference. That's a change. Those of us older who grew up on those things, who grew up without the computers, life is very different for you, having grown up with them. A different generational experience. Another example of that is this one here, the teacher and the student, and the teacher says, there aren't any icons to click. It's a chalkboard. It's a chalkboard. So when we moved to West Salem, my daughter, Rebecca, was in 5th grade. She missed the entire whiteboard generation because in Michigan we still had chalkboards. We moved to West Salem and they didn't have chalkboards. They didn't even have whiteboards, with the markers, the erasable whiteboards. They're using the electronic screens already. We move forward, and different generations experience different things. It's also true that generations change a little bit. When I was growing up, people would say, well, what does it mean to be middle-aged? And they'd say, well, middle-aged is when you hit 40. When you hit 40, you turn middle-aged. Well, that's not really true anymore. I think one place I saw said middle-aged is 55. I mean, that's a big jump, You're not middle-aged till you're 55. I'd like to think it's 65 now because I'm not there yet. But that's, the fact is we are getting older, but we are changing. Things change as we get older. And as I said earlier, remember, aging is a part of life. aging is life. So when we say, oh, you're just getting old, yeah, you're living. You're living. That's what it means. To get older is to have life and to be living. And so we have again, the generations starting from zero, the infant getting up all the way down to someone who is a senior. Now, it might not be as bad as we think, and I know you won't be able to see these numbers, so I'll share this with you, but this is an interesting research by the Pew Research Center people. One of the things they did, they went to people who were 18 to 64, and they went to people who were 65 and older, and they asked them some questions. So they asked the question, do you experience memory loss? Do you forget things? 57% of younger people said, yeah, when I'm old, I'm not going to remember a thing. Only 25% of seniors say, yeah, I don't remember things. 45% of younger people say, when I get to be a senior, I won't be able to drive. That's terrible. You know what? Seniors, only 14% say, I'm not allowed to drive anymore. People who are 18 to 64 say, are afraid, expect to have a serious illness. Only 21% of seniors experience that. And the point is, there are a whole bunch of things. Memory loss, not able to drive, or serious illness, feeling sad or depressed, not feeling needed, loneliness, trouble paying bills, being a burden. All those things that younger people are afraid that will happen to them. And it does happen to some, but not nearly as much as we think. That maybe being a senior isn't being some old person with a cane who can't do anything. Maybe being a senior, maybe there's more to it than that. And some good stuff too. The fact is that seniors have a lot to offer, okay? And so one way to think about seniors is not about somebody who can't do stuff, but as someone who's increasing in value, okay? But to be fair, getting old isn't always that much fun. It isn't always that much fun. So there is a balance there. Okay, so I got a worksheet hint for you. If you got your worksheet handy, make sure you have your worksheet out. This is going to be on your, there's some questions on your worksheet. But ponder some things. Think for a moment. What are some stereotypes that we have about seniors? What are the stereotypes that we think about with seniors? And which ones of those stereotypes are true and which ones maybe aren't so true? Think about that for a moment. What stereotypes do we think about seniors? And maybe some of them are true. Maybe some of them aren't. But now, let's be fair. What stereotypes do you think that seniors have about you? What do seniors think about kids? What are the stereotypes? All kids are whatever. And which ones are true and which ones aren't? Think about that for a moment too. The worksheet's going to ask you to do a little thinking about that as well. But maybe we need to think a little differently, okay? Maybe we need to think about generations a little differently, and maybe we can figure out a way to come together. Maybe we can figure out a way to come together. Okay, so another worksheet alert. I have another worksheet question. I want you to think about one positive experience you've had with a senior. Think about a time when maybe it was a grandparent or as a neighbor or stranger, when you had a positive experience with someone who was a senior citizen. And, did you have an experience once that wasn't so positive? Think about that for a moment and ask yourself, what did you learn from those two experiences? What did you learn from that? Think a little bit about that for a moment. But that's on your worksheet, so you can do that on your worksheet. So what does the Bible tell us? What does the Bible tell us? Lord, give me wisdom as I read your word. Okay, so this is another one on your worksheet. It's another worksheet question. So check out your worksheet and see what you're doing on this. And let's take a look for a real quick moment at some things that God says. From Exodus 20, verse 12, honor your father and your mother so that your days may be long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. Now, if you remember back in 7th and 8th grade, and we talked about this when we talked about the Ten Commandments, I'll give you the quick punchline is this. The reason your days may be long is that in the ancient world, if you couldn't produce, you were expected to go off into the desert, in the wilderness, and die if you were not productive. God comes along and says, no. you protect, you take care of your seniors. And you know why? Why is that going to make your life longer? Your kids are going to see you doing that. When you take care of your parents, your children will say, oh, that's what we do. And so when you become a senior, your kids will help take care of you. Okay? So Exodus 20:12. Proverbs 23:22. I love that face. Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Listen to the ones who brought you into this world. Think about that. You don't exist if it wasn't for your mom and your dad. Listen to them. That's all. There's Obi-Wan Kenobi. Way back in the Star Wars I grew up with. Is wisdom with the aged and understanding in length of days? Just asking the question. Are older people wiser? You know, they probably have some wisdom. Does being old automatically make you wiser? I don't think so. But, you know, it's worth listening. It's worth listening because, you know what? Your parents and your grandparents, they've been there before. I know you think everything's totally different now. It's not quite as different as we sometimes think. They've experienced life. At least listen to them. Even to your old age, from Isaiah, I am he. Even when you turn gray, I will carry you. I have made and I will bear. I will carry and will save. Even as we get older, God is with us and God holds us and God cares for us. The righteous flourish. In old age, they still produce fruit. You know, I'll tell you what, some of the most incredible people I have met in my life are people who are seniors. I could name a bunch of them in this church right now who just wow me. People like Carolyn and Eleanor and Richie and Mary, Paul and Marilyn and Connie and Carol, and Joe. And I mean, I could just, a whole bunch of names. I could go on and on of names of people who are seniors who wow me. I haven't even mentioned my mother yet. People who wow me. Think about that. They still produce fruit. Okay? And then from 2 Corinthians, we do not lose heart. Even though our outer nature is wasting away, our inner nature is being renewed day by day. That's why these people still produce fruit. Because they get it. They get it. That even though the body might not be quite once what it was, their inner nature is being renewed again and again. So think about those a little bit. You're going to do that on your worksheet. Think a little bit about that. Okay. So now what do we do? What do we do? Well, you know, in previous times, like a year ago, we eat. I am so bummed. Because unfortunately, we're not going to eat. Here's the thing. What we used to do, and what I hope we can do next year, but it'll miss you guys. We used to take small groups, your small groups, and pair you up with a senior or a senior couple in the congregation. And then we'd say, call them up, make a date, prepare dinner, you prepare the dinner, take it to their home, and eat it with them. Don't just drop it and run, eat it with them. So you're going to go, so in normal time, you would have gone and visited with them and spent an evening with some old person or old couple. I got to tell you, that is the best thing we've done in confirmation. You have no idea how many times I have had an adult. I had one a couple years ago, just to give an example. Guy comes up to me, he's one of the seniors, came up to me the Sunday after a group of 9th grade boys and their group guide had brought dinner over for him and his wife. He said to me, I never thought I could spend 2 hours having a wonderful conversation with a bunch of 9th graders. It was incredible for him. We've had groups of kids, small groups. We had one small group who got an Easter lily in honor of the person they had had dinner with the fall before, the November before. We had one group that went over before Christmas. Just decide, as a group, said, that's our group activity. We're going to go visit our person again. So both ways, both for kids and for the seniors, it's been a wonderful experience. And unfortunately, we can't do that this year. I am just so bummed. But I'm telling you this because I want you to understand. Here's the point. I want you to understand some things, even though you can't experience it the same way. You really can build a positive relationship with someone from another generation, even when they're not your family. You can do that. You can discover the power of connecting, especially over a meal. That's why we do Thanksgiving dinner together with our family, because we connect over a meal. It happens in the Bible all the time. The Bible's full of those stories. You can learn from them as you share with them. You can learn from them as you share with them. You can maybe discover both ways that those stereotypes we talked about aren't always true. That old people aren't always crotchety and cranky and mean and suspicious, and young people aren't always troublemakers. That young people aren't always obnoxious. You know, we learn that maybe those stereotypes aren't always true. Okay? So now what I want you to do here, I'm going to go to your worksheet before we finish up here. We're almost done. On your worksheet, so you've got a couple questions to deal with. There's two parts. Your worksheet has two parts. You've got two parts to the worksheet. Part one, what are the stereotypes we have about seniors? Which ones are true and which aren't? Remember, we talked about that earlier. What stereotypes do you think seniors have about kids? What are true, what isn't? And write down that one positive experience and that one negative, not so positive experience, and what did you learn from these? I'd like you to have this for class. So when we meet on, what did I say, it was November 4th, I think it is? We meet on November 4th on Zoom. I'd like you to have this prepared so we can talk about that. So we can talk about what are some of the positive things that we've experienced, what are some things that weren't so positive, and what about those stereotypes, okay? Then there's a second part to your worksheet. This, you don't have to have till the end of November, because this one's going to do a little more work. What I want you to do is connect with a senior. It can be grandma and grandpa. It's better if it's not your family, but that's okay. I know these days, sometimes we can't do it. Connect with a senior. Call up grandma, grandpa, call up the next door neighbor, whatever, and ask them, what stereotypes do they think kids have? What stereotypes do they think that seniors have about kids? And so they're kind of repeating the questions. Can they share with you a time when they were pleasantly surprised in a connection with some kid? And what made that so surprising and so positive? And last, ask them, what do they think seniors, what do they think that they as an old person can learn from kids? And what do they think kids can learn from seniors? Okay? You're just doing reporting. You're just asking these questions. If you feel uncomfortable, blame it on me. Tell them that pastor's got some weird questions for us. You know, got to do this. Keep them happy, whatever. But ask the questions and kind of report the answers to us, okay? Okay? So there you go. Get to work. You got some work to do. And see you Wednesday, We'll see you on Wednesday on November 4th as we do our Zoom session. If you're lacking the login information, get a hold of me. It's the same stuff as last month. We're keeping the same Zoom link gets you in. So if you've got that an email from last month, go back and get it. I'll try to send an email out to parents beforehand, but just get it and join us. So thanks a lot for being a part of this class. Again, this is again my favorite month for doing this is November with the meals with the seniors. We can't do it, so you have to do the next best thing. I appreciate your patience and your presence. So take care. Have a great week. I hope things are going well for you. I look forward to seeing you on November 4th.